Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take big, dense stacks of knowledge, boil them down, and give you the absolute most vital nuggets you need to become instantly better informed. So today, we're doing a deep dive into a concept that, on the surface, seems like a complete contradiction.
It really does.
It's this idea of finding immense, almost explosive power in something that's extremely, almost imperceptibly small.
Yeah, and the word atomic itself is perfect for this, right?
Exactly.
It has those two definitions. It's the smallest possible unit of matter, but it's also, the source of this incredible energy release.
And that duality is exactly what we're exploring today. We're focusing on how these remarkable, just disproportionate results can accumulate from tiny, tiny changes.
It's a really compelling place to start because our intuition, our immediate belief is that if you want massive results, a huge career change, getting incredibly fit, building wealth, you need these equally massive revolutionary actions.
You're looking for that silver bullet, that one big thing.
That one big thing, exactly. But the data, the research, it just consistently shows that the gap between mediocrity and world-class success is, well, it's often bridged by nothing more than a marginal 1% improvement.
Yes, 1%.
1%, but compounded daily, weekly, and yearly. That's the key.
And there is no more powerful, almost unbelievable case study for this than the story of British cycling.
Oh, it's a fantastic story.
So let's just frame the situation for you. It's 2003. For almost 100 years, professional cycling in Great Britain was it was defined by failure.
Total mediocrity.
I mean, they had won exactly one Olympic gold medal since 1908. One. They had never, ever won the Tour de France. Their reputation was so bad that a top European bike manufacturer actually refused to sell them equipment.
Right, because they were afraid that being associated with the British team would actually hurt their sales.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It would damage their brand. That's the kind of, institutional despair they were facing.
Total institutional despair. So then they hired Dave Brailsford as the performance director, and he doesn't come in and call for some multi-million-dollar stadium overhaul or, bringing in celebrity trainers. His strategy was deceptively simple.
And he called it the aggregation of marginal gains.
Exactly. A commitment to finding every single tiny factor involved in riding a bike and just improving it by 1%.
Okay, let's really break this down, because the lengths they went to for this 1% advantage, it goes so far beyond what you'd think. It's not just training and nutrition.
No, not at all. Of course, they started with the obvious things like redesigning the bike seats for better comfort, better stability.
And they started rubbing alcohol on the tires before a race for better grip, which seems obvious now, but it just wasn't standard practice then.
But then they went into areas that seem, almost absurdly hyper-specific.
Like the heated overshorts.
The electrically heated overshorts, yeah. To maintain the rider's ideal muscle temperature between the warm-up and the actual race starting.
They tested all these different fabrics in a wind tunnel to find the most aerodynamic material.
And they discovered that the racing suits that were designed for indoor tracks were actually more aerodynamic for outdoor road racing. So they just switched.
And then you get to the really legendary details. They hired a surgeon.
Yeah.
To teach the riders the absolute best way to wash their hands, to cut down on infections and getting sick.
They tested different massage gels to see which one led to the fastest muscle recovery.
And my favorite one, they painted the inside of the team truck white.
Why white?
So they could spot these tiny little specks of dust or dirt that might compromise the finely tuned mechanics of the bikes when they were being moved around.
See, and individually, none of those changes mean anything, right?
Right. Washing your hands a bit better isn't going to win you the Tour de France.
Of course not. But Brailsford understood that these hundreds of tiny adjustments wouldn't just add up, they would multiply. They'd compound into this holistic level of performance that their competitors weren't even thinking about.
And the results, they just speak for themselves. 5 years after he took over, at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, British cycling dominated. They won 60% of the available gold medals.
60%. It's an insane number.
Then 4 years later, London 2012, they broke 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. And over that decade, from 2007 to 2017, they captured 178 world championships and 5 Tour de France victories.
It went from being a complete joke to arguably the most successful run in the history of the sport, all built on 1%.
So the core lesson is there. Small improvements really do multiply into these remarkable results.
And our mission in this deep dive is to pull out that practical framework, what the source material calls the 4 laws of behavior change, that allows you to replicate this compounding power, not just in sports, but, in your career, your finances, your health.
Before we can get to the laws, though, we have to tackle the biggest hurdle, the reason most people give up before they ever see those dramatic results.
The quitting point.
Exactly. And it comes down to our expectation of linear progress.
Hmm.
If I start, say, writing for 10 minutes a day, I expect my skill to just go up in a straight line day after day. But that's not how it works at all.
No, it's not. And that leads to so much disappointment. The sources illustrate this perfectly with this concept called the plateau of latent potential.
Okay, break that down.
So when you start a new routine, let's say you're learning a language for 20 minutes a day, you're putting in a ton of effort at the beginning, and you expect that results curve to go up steadily to match your effort.
Makes sense.
But in reality, for weeks, maybe even months, that results curve stays almost flat. It barely moves. You feel like you're grinding away, but nothing is happening.
And that gap, that huge gap between the work you're putting in and the results you're seeing.
That is the valley of disappointment. And this is the point where the vast majority of people get discouraged. They think the habit is useless, and they quit. They're looking for that instant feedback that just doesn't exist in a delayed return world.
It reminds me of that classic ice cube analogy. I
Yeah.
love this because it perfectly captures that hidden, stored work.
It's perfect. So imagine you have an ice cube in a room, and the room is slowly warming up. It goes from 25 degrees to 28 to 30 to 31.
Right, you're putting in energy, the temperature's rising, but the cube is still a cube.
Yeah.
Nothing looks different on the outside.
And that's the key. That process, those earlier degrees, it's not wasted effort. You're just storing up the necessary energy to hit a threshold.
Mm.
Then the room hits 32 degrees.
And that 1 degree shift, which felt exactly the same as all the previous 1 degree shifts, suddenly unlocks this massive, visible change. The ice melts.
Exactly. The crucial takeaway for you, the listener, is that the work you're putting in today is not wasted. It's being stored as latent potential. It's only after you cross that invisible critical threshold, that melting point, that the accumulated value of all that previous effort is suddenly revealed.
And that's when you see that exponential curve and your results just seem to skyrocket overnight.
So consistency isn't really about seeing immediate results. It's about staying on the curve long enough to hit your threshold.
Okay, let's move to our second theme, which is all about the architecture of change. It's about making sure we're focused on the right system instead of, the wrong goal.
Yes, and this is a trap so many of us fall into. We have this goals-first mentality.
I know I do. I catch myself all the time saying, I'll be happy once I finish this project, or I'll be successful once I get that promotion.
And that mentality is it's fundamentally problematic, and the research on long-term motivation shows this again and again. There are 2 main problems with it. First, when you live for the goal, you are constantly postponing happiness.
It's always just over the next hill.
Always. You create this mental prison where fulfillment is always just out of reach. It's years of unnecessary striving. Second, goals create what's called an either-or conflict.
Meaning, either you achieve the goal and you're a success, or you fall short and you're a failure.
Exactly. You box yourself into this very narrow, fragile version of success. I mean, what happens the day after you win the race? Your purpose is gone. You've lost the system that got you there.
So the insight here is that if changing your habits feels hard, it's probably because we're either focused on the wrong thing, the outcome, or we're trying to change in the wrong way.
We have to flip the script. Stop focusing only on what you want to achieve and start focusing really intensely on who you want to become.
An identity.
It's all about identity. Behind every system of actions, there is a system of beliefs. The actions you take are a direct reflection of the type of person you believe that you are.
So you're not aiming to run a marathon. You're aiming to become a runner.
You're aiming to become a runner. You're not trying to write a book. You're trying to become a writer. The real goal isn't the outcome. It's to embody a specific identity.
This shift from outcome-based habits to identity-based habits is, well, it's the real powerhouse for long-term change. I've personally struggled with this. My brain is always telling me I'm not a morning person or I'm not a natural writer, and I feel that negative identity pressure constantly.
And that's a perfect example of how your self-narrative just dictates your behavior. Let's look at the story of Brian Clark, the entrepreneur who had this lifelong habit of chewing his fingernails.
Right. He started with the outcome goal. I need to stop chewing my nails.
And he'd use willpower, and he'd manage to stop for a little while, but it always came back. The real turning point for him wasn't some new technique or just trying harder.
No, it was when he decided to get his first professional manicure.
Which seems like a strange solution. He thought maybe just paying for it would add some financial friction, and make him not want to ruin something he paid for.
But it was a much deeper psychological shift, right?
It was. The manicure just made his nails look genuinely nice for the first time. And the manicurist was praising them, saying how healthy they were looking. Suddenly, he had this powerful, intrinsic motivation. He had pride.
He was proud of his nails.
He was proud of his nail. So he stopped asking, how do I stop chewing? And he started asking, what would the type of person who takes pride in caring for their nails do? He changed his identity.
And the more pride you take in any part of your identity, your fitness, your professionalism, the more motivated you become to maintain the habits that go with it.
Exactly. If you see yourself as a runner, you just don't skip your daily run. That's not what runners do. The identity comes first.
And on the flip side, you mentioned my negative identity. When we repeat those stories, I'm bad at math, I'm always late, we create these deep mental grooves.
You do, and the strange consequence is that you subconsciously resist actions that would contradict that self-image. You find yourself self-sabotaging just to maintain the identity you've built, even if it's a negative one.
It's self-sabotage, but rooted in just trying to be consistent with who you think you are.
Exactly. So once we have that identity straight, we can look at the mechanism of change. And all habits, good or bad, run on the same basic learning mechanism, which goes all the way back to E.L. Thorndike and his experiments with cats in puzzle boxes.
Ah, Thorndike's principle, the law of effect. This is really the bedrock of habit formation.
It is. He'd put cats inside these puzzle boxes, and they could escape and get a food reward by doing something simple, like pressing a lever. At first, they were just stumbling around randomly.
But every time they accidentally hit the lever and got the reward.
They learned. With each repetition, they got faster and faster. The core insight was simple. Behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated. Behaviors followed by unpleasant consequences are avoided.
And that led to our modern understanding of the four-step feedback loop that governs all of our habits.
The full loop. Cue, craving, response, and reward.
Let's break those down.
Okay, the cue is the trigger. It's the thing that tells your brain a reward is available. The craving is the motivational force, the desire for that reward. The response is the actual habit, the action you take.
And the reward is the satisfying outcome that closes the loop and tells your brain, hey, that was good, let's do that again.
That's the whole cycle. And the sources make a really interesting point here about freedom. We often worry that building habits will restrict us, turn us into robots.
But the research suggests the exact opposite. By automating the foundational stuff, good financial habits, basic health routines, you actually free up a massive amount of mental space and energy.
You do. It's only by making the fundamentals easy and automatic that you can attain the mental freedom you need for higher level thinking, for real creativity.
All right, let's jump into the practical application. The first law of behavior change is make it obvious. And this is all about that initial cue stage of the loop.
And the real difficulty here is rooted in our own consciousness, or lack thereof. Habits are dangerous precisely because they move from our conscious control to the automatic, non-conscious part of our mind.
So we fall into these old negative patterns without even realizing what triggered the behavior.
Exactly. So many of our failures aren't due to laziness, but just a profound lack of self-awareness about the subtle cues in our environment that kick off the whole chain reaction.
The anecdotes for this are always so wild because they show how deeply ingrained this stuff can be. Like the retail clerk who was trained to cut up used gift cards.
Oh, right. And one day she was just on complete autopilot and a customer hands her a valid credit card.
And she just cuts it right in half. The action was completely separate from any conscious thought.
Or the story of the paramedic who instinctively knew her father-in-law was having a heart attack. She didn't consciously register all the signs, but her trained brain saw a slight shift in the blood pattern on his face and just predicted the outcome.
So you don't even need to be fully aware of the cue for your brain to recognize the pattern and start the habit.
Your non-conscious mind is constantly processing and predicting for you.
Okay, so if the problem is a lack of self-awareness, we need a way to force ourselves to be more conscious. The best example of this has to be the safety system from the Japanese rail systems.
Pointing and calling. It's such a beautifully simple, low-tech solution to human error.
So the train operators, before they do anything, they physically point at signals at speed indicators, and they call out the status out loud.
Signal is green. Speed is 40 miles per hour. It forces you to integrate multiple senses, your eyes, your hands, your mouth, your ears, just to acknowledge the cue. It raises it from a non-conscious habit to a fully conscious action.
And the data on it is incredible. It reduces errors by something like 85% and cuts accidents by 30%.
It works because we so often overlook things when we just assume that the next moment is going to be exactly like the last one.
So beyond forcing consciousness, we also need to redesign our environment. I mean, about half of the brain's resources are dedicated just to visual processing.
That's a huge amount. So we're far more likely to notice and respond to cues that really stand out. If you want to write in the morning but your laptop is buried in a bag in the closet, the cue is invisible. The habit is not going to happen.
And the reverse is also true. Making a cue obvious can drastically change behavior. We see it in public design all the time.
The famous example is from the Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. The cleaning staff were having trouble with spillage in the men's restrooms.
Right, so they put a tiny sticker shaped like a fly near the center of each urinal.
And men, being men, subconsciously aimed for the target. It's just instinct. And that simple visual cue cut the bathroom cleaning costs by 8% a year. The behavior was just effortlessly guided by an obvious visual cue.
That's a powerful example, and you can do that in your private life too. The study that tracked electricity usage.
Yes, it showed that homes where the electrical meter was in the main hallway, a really obvious, easy-to-track location, used way less electricity than homes where the meter was hidden down in a dark basement.
Because if the behavior is obvious and easy to track, the behavior changes. The feedback loop is immediate.
This brings us to a really critical strategy for managing cues, which is redefining your context. The sources recommend this mantra: one space, one use.
So you train yourself to link a specific habit to a very particular context.
Exactly. Think about the classical conditioning that happens with insomniacs. They're often told to only get into bed when they feel tired.
And if they can't fall asleep, they have to get up and go to a different room.
Right. And what that does is it reassociates the context of the bed only with sleeping. It strips away the learned association of the bed with a scrolling on your phone or worrying about work or just staring at the ceiling. The context dictates the cue.
That poses a really interesting challenge, though. For you, the listener, who might be working from a small apartment where your office and your bedroom are the same space, how does that one space, one use rule work then?
That's a great question. When you can't have physical separation, you have to use temporary symbolic barriers to redefine the space.
So what would that look like?
It could be using scent. Maybe you light a specific candle only when you're in work mode and you blow it out the second you transition to rest mode. It could be sound, a certain type of music that you only play for deep work.
You're training your brain to recognize that even though the physical location is the same, the functional context has changed.
Exactly. You're creating psychological walls where physical ones can't exist.
Okay, so what about the flip side? What about making our bad habits less obvious?
That's the inversion of Law 1. Make it invisible. Trying to just rely on raw willpower is a terrible long-term strategy. We are all products of our environment. So if you're struggling with a bad habit, the single most effective thing you can do is remove the cue completely.
So if you check your phone too much in the morning, leave it charging in the kitchen. The friction of having to physically get up and go get it is often enough to stop you.
Exactly. If you want to stop playing so many video games, unplug the console, put the controller in a box and put that box in a closet. Just removing that one potent cue, the sight of the controller on the coffee table, can cause the entire bad habit to fade away.
The battle against temptation is won by designing an environment where you are tempted as little as possible.
Okay, so that leads us to Law 2, make it attractive. This tackles the craving stage of the habit loop, and to really understand attraction and desire today, we have to talk about dopamine.
Right. Habits are, at their core, a dopamine-driven feedback loop.
And it's so often mislabeled as the pleasure molecule, but it's not. It's the anticipation molecule. It's the core driver of motivation and craving. Every single highly habit-forming behavior drugs, junk food, social media is tied to a spike in dopamine when the cue appears.
And this is where the specific neurological insight is just so crucial. The brain allocates way more circuitry for wanting rewards than it does for actually liking them.
That is the key distinction. Researchers found that a part of the brain that's crucial for craving, the nucleus accumbens, can be 100% activated during the anticipation phase. the wanting.
But the actual enjoyment, the liking, only activates about 10% of those same pathways.
Desire comes first, and it often just overwhelms the actual enjoyment of the reward. We find ourselves chasing things we don't even really like that much, but that we desperately want the moment the cue appears.
You see the raw power of this in those animal experiments. The mice that were engineered to get a hit of dopamine every time they poked their nose in a box.
They developed such an intense craving that they would poke the box up to 800 times an hour.
Yeah,
It was just raw, unchecked craving.
that sounds extreme, but then the sources compare it to a human behavior.
Yeah.
The average slot machine player spins the wheel about 600 times an hour.
It's eerily similar. The action isn't fueled by the occasional win. It's fueled by the relentless dopamine spikes tied to the anticipation of the win.
Which leads us directly into the main challenge of Law 2, which is supernormal stimuli. We live in a world that is just packed with cues designed to be irresistible.
A supernormal stimulus is just an exaggerated version of a natural cue that triggers a much stronger response than the natural one would. The biologist Nico Tinbergen showed this with herring gull chicks.
Right, they naturally peck at the little red dot on their mother's beak to get food.
But if he showed them a fake cardboard beak with 3 big, exaggerated red dots, they would peck at the fake one frantically and completely ignore their actual mother.
The exaggerated stimulus just bypasses their normal logic.
It does. Same with the gray-legged goose. It will instinctively roll its eggs back into the nest. But if you offer it a volleyball, it will use all of its effort to roll the giant volleyball back because the larger size triggers an even stronger protective instinct.
And modern life is just filled with these evolutionary hacks. Junk food is the perfect supernormal stimulus. Our ancestors valued salt, sugar, and fat because they were scarce.
And the modern food industry engineers products to be these highly concentrated versions that deliver a massive caloric payload and trigger maximum dopamine.
They also maximize something called dynamic contrast.
Yes. Think about the crunch of a chip followed immediately by the creamy melt of cheese. That constant sensory novelty prevents your brain from getting used to it so you don't lose interest or feel full. It encourages you to just keep eating.
So given that we're up against these supernormal stimuli, we have to leverage that craving. And that's where temptation bundling comes in.
This is where you associate a habit you need to do with something you want to do. It's based on Premack's principle. High probability behaviors will reinforce low probability ones.
So you use the attractive action as the reward for doing the necessary one.
You find the craving, and then you attach the habit to it.
I love the engineering example for this. The student, Ronan Byrne, who wanted to watch Netflix but knew he needed to exercise.
So he literally hacked his stationary bike and connected it to his laptop. Netflix would only play if he was cycling above a certain speed. If he slowed down, the show paused. He successfully bundled his craving for TV with his need for exercise.
Marketers do this constantly. ABC branded their Thursday night TV lineup, TGIT, thank God it's Thursday.
And they actively associated watching their shows, what they needed you to do, with things you already wanted to do. Drink red wine, eat popcorn, relax.
The relaxation reward got intrinsically tied to the cue of tuning into ABC on Thursdays.
So for you, for your writing habit, you could bundle it. Maybe you only allow yourself to listen to that new podcast episode you're excited about while you're writing.
I use the craving for the new content to motivate the difficult action of writing. That's a perfect application.
You can do it everywhere. Only get that fancy pedicure while you're processing your overdue work emails. You're giving an immediate, attractive reward to a habit that would otherwise only offer delayed gratification.
And finally, under Law 2, we have this massive invisible force, the pull of the group.
We are herd animals. The sources remind us that, historically, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Our desire to fit in and belong is an incredibly powerful driver of our habits.
Our earliest and most fundamental habits are often imitated, not consciously chosen.
Social norms are the invisible rules guiding our behavior. If your friends all value fitness, you'll be inclined to value it too. If they value late nights and drinking, those behaviors become your normal.
So the powerful conclusion here is that one of the single most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior.
Exactly. The story of the MIT robotics class, where 4 of the 10 students later became astronauts, that wasn't just luck. They were in a culture where reaching for those kinds of incredibly ambitious goals was just the default setting.
So you want to find a tribe where, first, the desired behavior is normal, and second, you already share something in common with them.
Yes, that's key. It makes the change feel more attractive because it feels like something people like me already do.
But there is a dark side to that strong social pull.
There is. The normal behavior of the tribe often overpowers what an individual might want.
Like the chimpanzee study. A chimp moves to a new group, and even if that group uses a less effective way to crack nuts, the new chimp will quickly abandon its superior method just to blend in.
The reward of social acceptance outweighs the reward of being more efficient or even being right.
So when changing your habits means conforming to the tribe, it's attractive and easy. When it means challenging the tribe, it becomes unattractive and requires a ton of extra effort.
Choose your tribe wisely, because you will, consciously or not, adopt its standards.
All right, the third law shifts our focus from our internal drive to the physical action itself. Make it easy. And this addresses the response part of the loop, and it's all guided by one fundamental truth about us: the law of least effort.
The law of least effort just dictates that we will naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work. We're designed to conserve energy. If there are two paths to the same result, we will always choose the path of least resistance.
And this principle isn't just about personal choices. It plays out on this massive geological scale. Jared Diamond's theory about the spread of agriculture.
It is a stunning example of how friction scales over time. The primary landmass of Europe and Asia runs east-west. And this means that locations along the same latitude share very similar climates and seasons.
So it's a low-friction environment. A crop that was domesticated in Italy could probably be grown in China without much change.
Exactly. But the Americas and Africa, by contrast, run north-south. So if you travel north to south, you hit these massive climate variations. Farmers couldn't just take their seeds with them. They had to constantly find and domesticate entirely new plants.
So because of that friction, agriculture spread 2 to 3 times faster across Europe and Asia.
And that seemingly small geographical difference compounded over thousands of years, leading to huge differences in population, stability, and technology. The lesson is undeniable. You reduce friction, and progress just accelerates exponentially.
So we have to apply that same ruthless approach to our own personal system.
We do. Today, the most successful products are the ones that remove tiny bits of friction from our lives. Dating apps removed the friction of social introductions.
Uber removed the friction of finding a cab and paying with cash.
Voice-activated speakers succeeded because it's just easier to say, play my writing playlist, than it is to pull out your phone, open an app, and find it yourself. The goal is always to deliver the same result in the easiest way possible.
So we can adopt this friction-reducing philosophy through something called priming the environment for future use.
This is basically a strategy of proactive laziness. Instead of just cleaning up after your last action, you design the environment to make the next action as easy as possible.
Like the IT developer, Oswald Knuckles, who practiced resetting the room. When he finished watching TV, he'd put the remote back on its stand, fold the blanket, and arrange the pillows.
He wasn't just cleaning up, he was preparing for the next time he wanted to relax, reducing the friction to start that routine.
So for my writing habit, this would mean that before I go to bed, I pull out my laptop, open the writing software, and leave a glass of water next to my desk.
Exactly. So when your alarm goes off, the 2-minute action of starting is already underway. The friction is gone. It's the difference between motion and action.
Explain that.
Motion is planning, brainstorming, strategizing. It feels productive, but it's really a form of procrastination. Action is the actual practice that delivers the result. By priming your environment, you make sure you can bypass the motion and get straight to the action.
And to overcome that initial barrier, we need the 2-minute rule.
Yes. This rule states that nearly any large goal can be scaled down into a behavior that takes 2 minutes or less to start.
The mistake we make is trying to do too much at once. We go from 0 to, I'm going to write 2,000 words today.
Which requires massive activation energy. The secret of the 2-minute rule is to always stay below the threshold where the habit feels like work.
So for my writing goal, instead of write a book, the 2-minute entry point is just open the writing document. The goal is just to show up.
I want to run a marathon becomes I need to put on my running clothes. That's phase 1 of the habit. It takes 2 minutes, and it focuses you on practicing the start of the habit, which is the most critical part.
And once we've made the habit easy, we want to automate it as much as possible using what are called commitment devices.
Automation is key. Civilization advances by extending the number of operations we can do without thinking. Think about John Henry Patterson installing the first cash register.
It wasn't just to track sales. It was to stop employees from stealing. It automated honest behavior by adding friction to the bad habit.
We use automation constantly today. Automatic deductions for retirement, automated bill payments, website blockers to stop us from browsing social media. These are one-time actions that pay off again and again.
And if you can't automate it, you use the inversion of Law 3. Make it
Mhm.
difficult. You impose massive friction on the bad habit.
The classic example is Victor Hugo, who was procrastinating while writing The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He had his assistant literally lock away all his clothes, leaving him with nothing but a giant shawl to wear.
He couldn't go outside. He was forced to stay home and write.
He created a physical device that imposed extreme friction on the temptation.
There's a powerful modern parallel to that. An author had his assistant reset all of his social media passwords every single Monday morning.
So he was logged out on every device.
He worked all week without distraction,
Yeah.
and he'd only get the new passwords on Friday. And that simple friction, the monumental effort of having to track down his assistant to get the password, was enough to just cut off the behavior completely.
All right, that brings us to the fourth and final law, which addresses the reward stage. Make it satisfying. This is the key to making habits stick for the long haul, because our brains are wired to look for immediate satisfaction.
And this is where we have this fundamental conflict between our evolutionary hardware and our modern world. Our brains evolved in an immediate return environment.
Right. If our Paleolithic ancestors went hunting and were successful, they ate immediately. If they failed to find food, they starved immediately. The feedback was instant.
But today, we live in a delayed return environment. If I work out today, the actual health benefits won't show up for months or years. If I save money today, the reward, a comfortable retirement, is decades away.
And since our brains are still optimized for the savannah, our preference for instant gratification is incredibly strong. It makes sustaining these long-term habits really, really difficult.
And so the updated cardinal rule has to acknowledge that.
It has to. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. The path to success requires us to ignore immediate rewards for delayed ones, but we have to work with our human nature, not against it.
So we have to find a way to make that delayed reward feel immediate.
We have to hack the satisfaction loop. We have to add some form of immediate, visceral pleasure to the long-term habit.
The Karachi hand-washing study is a perfect example of this.
It is. Public health worker Stephen Luby and his team were trying to improve hygiene in Karachi, Pakistan. They found that people knew hand-washing was important, but they just weren't doing it consistently.
So the solution wasn't more education.
No, it was sensory appeal. They introduced Safeguard soap, which was a premium soap. It foamed up really easily, and critically, it smelled great.
And that strong, immediate sensory feedback, the foam, the nice scent, it made hand-washing an attractive, satisfying experience. It turned it from a chore into a momentary pleasure.
And Luby noted that this simple, immediate pleasure was the key to rapid, consistent habit adoption, even for a behavior with these huge long-term health benefits.
You can create our own little self-reinforcement loops like this. If you skip buying that expensive $7 coffee,
Immediately transfer that $7 into a dedicated savings account. Maybe you label it down payment fund. The immediate reward of seeing that account balance go up, even by a little bit, is satisfying.
so you're making it immediately satisfying to do nothing, to avoid that instant consumption, which powerfully reinforces the long-term behavior.
And one of the most powerful tools for translating that abstract satisfaction into immediate feedback is habit tracking.
It's the ultimate habit multiplier, really, because it leverages multiple laws at once. It makes the behavior obvious, it becomes an attractive game you want to win, and it's deeply satisfying to see your progress.
It creates this visual record that's highly motivating. Like Trent Gearsmith, the young stockbroker. He'd start his day with 120 paper clips in one jar.
And after every single sales call, he'd move one clip over to the empty jar.
He wasn't focused on the huge delayed reward of a multi-million-dollar portfolio. He was focused entirely on the immediate satisfaction of moving that one paperclip, of keeping the chain alive. And he was bringing in $5 million for his firm within 18 months.
That's the famous "don't break the chain" mantra from Jerry Seinfeld. He wasn't focused on whether the joke he wrote that day was good or not. He was just focused on showing up every day and putting that X on the calendar.
The momentum itself becomes the reward. The goal is just not to break the streak.
But we have to be careful that we're tracking the right things. The sources warn against just measuring something because it's easy to measure.
Right. If you're a writer, tracking the number of words you write is easy, but it doesn't necessarily track quality. In a restaurant, tracking daily revenue is simple, but tracking how many customers finish their entire meal actually tracks customer satisfaction, which drives long-term success.
Okay, so to sustain motivation, after a habit is established, we have to deal with the biggest threat, which isn't failure, it's boredom.
This is where the Goldilocks rule comes in.
The Goldilocks rule.
It's a principle of optimal challenge. It says that we experience peak motivation, that flow state, when we're working on tasks that are right on the edge of our current abilities.
So it has to be difficult enough to stretch you, but not so difficult that it's overwhelming.
Exactly. If you're an expert chess player and you play against a beginner, you get bored. If you play against the world champion, you lose motivation because it's impossible. But playing against an equal, where victory is possible but requires real effort, that's where you're focused.
That is the great challenge. No habit stays interesting forever.
And the greatest threat to long-term success isn't failure. You can usually bounce back from that. It's boredom. At some point, the difference between amateurs and professionals is that professionals stick to the schedule. They embrace the grind, even when it's not exciting.
You have to fall in love with boredom.
You have to fall in love with boredom, which sounds incredibly counterintuitive.
So how do you actually do that?
By using the Goldilocks rule to design deliberate, managed change. Look at Steve Martin's comedy career. He spent 18 years refining his act. Each year, he'd expand it by just a minute or two. He was constantly adding new, slightly challenging material, the manageable difficulty.
But he always kept a few jokes that he knew were guaranteed to get laughs.
The small, immediate victory. He maintained that perfect ratio of success and challenge for almost 2 decades. He made micro improvements, not massive leaps, and he always made sure he won just enough to keep going.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we need to bring all these laws together by focusing on 2 key elements for long-term mastery: finding the right game to play and committing to reflection.
Right. Finding the right game involves what's called the explore-exploit trade-off. At the beginning of any new endeavor, a career, a hobby, you should be in a period of intense exploration, trying lots of different things.
But once you find something that seems to be working, you shift gears and you exploit it, dedicating most of your energy to that one focused area.
The research suggests the optimal balance is to work on the strategy that seems best about 80 to 90% of the time, but you keep exploring with the remaining 10 to 20%.
So you get the benefits of focused effort, but you stay nimble enough to see new opportunities. It's like Google's 80-20 rule for employees.
Exactly. And if you can't find a game where the odds are already stacked in your favor, the advice is simple. Create your own unique game.
Like Scott Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comic strip, he knew he wasn't the world's best artist.
Nor was he the funniest comedian or the smartest businessman.
But very few people could draw well and write jokes and had years of business experience. By combining 3 just okay skills, he created a rare skill stack.
He basically eliminated his competition. He wasn't competing against the best cartoonists. He was competing against almost no one who had that unique combination of skills.
The lesson is clear. When you can't win by being better than everyone else, you win by being different. You rewrite the rules of the game to favor the abilities you already have.
And finally, to make sure you don't succumb to that gradual slide, the slow, imperceptible erosion of your good habits, you have to build in formal, structured reflection and review.
Reviewing prevents complacency. It stops the boredom from setting in.
Right. You need things like an annual review built into your schedule. What went well this year? What didn't? What did I learn?
And the integrity report.
Yeah.
Periodically asking yourself, am I living and working with integrity based on the person I want to become? Am I really embodying that identity?
These are the crucial moments of refinement that tell you when it's time to upgrade your habits and take on a new Goldilocks challenge.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. We've spent this entire deep dive mapping out these rational, logical systems, the 4 laws, to change our behavior. But if emotion is the ultimate driver, doesn't that make all this logic secondary?
That is the central paradox. We have to remember how the brain actually works. Psychologists talk about System 1, which is our primary emotional fast mode of thinking, our default. System 2 is the secondary rational slow mode.
And we are rational and logical only after we've already been emotional.
The feeling of desire or pain comes first, and then that compels the behavior. So the logic of the 4 laws isn't meant to replace emotion. It's meant to engineer the environment around your emotion.
So you use a rational system like the law of least effort to make the healthy action emotionally easier than the unhealthy one.
Or you use temptation bundling to make the healthy action more emotionally attractive and desirable than the unhealthy one.
So the goal isn't to think your way to better habits. It's to design an environment that makes the emotional path of least resistance align with your logical long-term goals.
Exactly. Even with the clearest, most logical plan, if you don't find the underlying habit attractive and immediately satisfying, you won't stick with it. The emotional impulse just won't be there. It's desire, not intelligence, that prompts behavior.
Which means the advice might be even simpler than all the science we've just discussed. Being curious is better than being smart.
It is. Curiosity, which is rooted in desire and a willingness to explore, is what prompts the behavior, the effort, and the willingness to just endure that valley of disappointment long enough to see the growth.
A profound point to end on. Let your curiosity lead the way and then build the systems around it. Thank you for diving deep with us. We hope you feel empowered to start building your own atomic habits, one tiny, powerful change at a time.